Good morning, everyone. Okay, we'll get started. My name is Andrea Sankey. I'll be moderating this panel. I'm the host of the Newsmakers on TRT World in Istanbul, and I'd like to welcome you to the final day of the Antalya Diplomacy Forum and this panel on climate change, asking how future generations will remember us. And we will remember that in July of last year, the United Nations Secretary General announced that we had reached an era of global boiling. We saw temperatures hit record highs around the planet. There were massive forest fires in Greece, Hawaii, Canada. We'll remember Canada spread smoke for hundreds of miles beyond its borders across North America, really setting some of the most surreal scenery hundreds of miles away. The year before that, we'd seen record catastrophic flooding in Pakistan, for example. That left, in that one episode, more than 20 million people in need of humanitarian assistance. And that even prompted at the time the Pakistani government to demand that developed countries begin paying developing countries for the damage that they're suffering at the hands of the world's biggest polluters. So those are just a few examples, but needless to say, we've still failed to meet many of the targets laid out by various global climate agreements, not least limiting global warming to below 1.5 degrees Celsius. Now, some may argue that we can actually still reach that goal of 1.5 degrees by 2050, but many scientists, climatologists have just said it's too late, and we'll now have to focus more on ways to mitigate the worst damage that is going to cause. The green transition, that's one of those ways. And achieving net zero emissions over the next 2 decades is another. But can we do it? And if we don't, what are we leaving to future generations and what will they think of us? So let me introduce the panel now that is charged with debating those questions. Immediately to my left, from Gambia, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, International Cooperation and Gambians Abroad, Mamadou Tangara. From Madagascar, Raffaravavita Fika Rasata. She is also the Minister of Foreign Affairs for the Republic of Madagascar. And Mehmet Kemal Bozay is the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs for the Republic of Turkey. Thanks all so much for being with me. I'm going to begin by letting each of you explain what your individual nations have been facing as far as the adverse effects of climate change are concerned, and what changes you're expecting both domestically and internationally to address those changes so that we can actually explain this to the next generation. So let me begin with the Minister from Gambia.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting us and sharing this panel with these distinguished panelists. I have good news to share, and I will also share my frustration. The Gambia, according to research, is one of the 2 countries that are on track when it comes to complying with reaching the targets of the Paris Agreement. So that shows that we've made a lot of efforts in a nationally determined contributions. But I said I will share that good news, but also share my frustration. You know, the last COP, I was at the last COP in Dubai, but before that, after the COP in Germany, I decided not to attend any more COP, because you leave the COP with a lot of frustration. Every time you go to the COPs, there are a lot of pledges, and at the end, our population think that we are receiving the money, but it's being embezzled by governments, which is not the reality, because people will make big pledges, but we will never see the color of the money. Right. And that reminds me of the words of the late president of Ghana, John Atta Mills. He said that they are talking about donor fatigue, but we are talking about pledges fatigue. You go to all these conferences, there are big pledges towards Africa, but nothing is seen. So that's where my frustration is coming from. I think it's important that when we do not go and be carried away by the euphoria of these conferences, making big pledges but not walking the talk.
Do quickly tell us, though, what your country, you said you're one of the few that's on track to meet the goals. What have you done? Which goals exactly are you meeting? Where have you met the challenges best?
Well, we had ambitious target by reducing CO2 emission by 47% by the year 2035 and zero net carbon emission by 2050. And in terms of mitigation, a number of measures have been taken by the government. And I think we are also blessed to have one of the top 9 negotiators who is coming from Gambia, who also end up working with the Green Climate Fund and is back in the Gambia. And we've benefited tremendously from his advice.
Excellent. Good leadership is always key. Okay, let me ask the minister from Madagascar to explain your unique circumstances. If you press the button at the bottom in the red, yeah, sure.
So what was your question again?
Yeah, explain where Madagascar actually stands, the greatest challenges you're facing as far as climate change is concerned, what you're doing domestically and what you're expecting internationally to meet your unique challenges on Madagascar.
Très bien, je vais répondre en français. Effectivement, Madagascar est un des pays les plus vulnérables aux impacts du changement climatique. Madagascar est vulnérable à un point où notre pays accuse de pertes économiques de près de 400 millions de dollars par an. En termes de pertes économiques, donc ce qui représente vraiment beaucoup d'argent et de revenus qui sont bien évidemment enlevés du pays. Donc nous, notre attente vis-à-vis des différents partenariats mondiaux, c'est vraiment de pouvoir bénéficier et faire bénéficier aux populations vulnérables de ces différents financements qui sont disponibles. D'abord, puisque nous estimons qu'en tant que nation insulaire, nous sommes plus exposés que d'autres nations aux impacts du changement climatique. Madagascar est souvent confronté à différentes formes d'aléas climatiques, notamment les cyclones, la sécheresse aiguë qui touche particulièrement le sud de Madagascar et qui a des impacts considérables sur les populations locales, notamment les femmes et les enfants. Plusieurs initiatives doivent être prises d'abord pour mieux tenir compte des spécificités des nations insulaires comme Madagascar, mais aussi surtout parce que nous avons besoin d'être entendus au niveau des instances internationales importantes comme l'Organisation des Nations Unies, et nous plaidons continuellement pour une meilleure accessibilité au fonds climatique. Donc voilà, en quelques mots, ce que mon pays attend des différentes initiatives mondiales, et nous continuons à plaider en faveur des pays vulnérables comme Madagascar, puisque des milliers, des centaines de milliers d'enfants et de femmes souffrent des inondations, de la sécheresse, et surtout, puisque nous devons finalement nous adapter dans un monde où nous polluons moins, mais nous devons payer plus les conséquences des pollutions qui sont faites par d'autres nations.
Actually, we pollute less, but we pay more. So we are spending more than the countries who are actually polluting.
Exactly. And again, that's what the Pakistani government had brought up. That is, they are paying the highest price for the damage that's been done by the richest countries that are the leading cause of climate change. We'll talk more about that. Let me first get the case for Turkey and the challenges that Turkey is facing.
Thank you very much. It's great to be part of this panel. This is one of the most challenging panels, and the question is a very challenging question, actually. We have some targets, and then our net zero emission target is 2053, and our national NDC is 41%. We have those targets, but in order to get these targets, reach these targets, we have also some planning, and just recently we worked on having some contacts with the European institutions, relevant institutions. Our exchange, we need some kind of a pricing of this arrangements, and now we are working together with some institutions on that. What is important is to have the climate law. And in 2024, we will have the climate law, hopefully adopted by the parliament. We are making the draft of it. But I will go back to the main question. How will future generations remember us? And the main, they ask the young generation, they make some polls, research, and they ask, how do you define this era if you would like to do in one word? They say uncertainty. And we have the same thing, same uncertainty for the climate issue as well. You know, we prepare something, we prepare some plans, some strategies, but then when I read recently some reports, we even do not know how we measure this 1.5 degree. And today, they explained that 3 days ago, I believe, it's 1.52 degrees at this point. But there is a question how we measured it. And also small things keeps this uncertainty as well. When I small things, planktons, aerosols, and we don't know how to measure them. NASA just recently on the 8th of February sent a satellite to measure it. Because we don't know, we talk about climate change, we talk about some criteria, but we are not sure what are these criteria. And this is why I will answer in a short way. The young generations, future generations, will remember us. They didn't know what they were measuring. They will remember us with uncertainty, and we should be very quick, swiftly work on to get the standards of it. All these targets are put. We say 2053, others say 2050, they say 2030. But what I see that in achieving this, we have some delays, we have some changes, and this is the main question. We should have some standard, and the United Nations work is very important. And here, you know, when there is a cloud in Iceland, Madagascar is affected, Gambia has some repercussions, Turkey has repercussions. This is not some issue that we should turn it to a show in order to have a beauty contest. I'll have it this time, I'll have it that time. And also we should be really very realistic about how we use renewable energy, the capacity and everything. And Turkey would like to have a very realistic approach, not putting some targets unreachable, but also to be on the safe side of doing something for the future generations. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll ask some more specific questions now about each country, and let me start again with Gambia, because thank you for raising the issue and so clearly stating it, this donor fatigue versus pledge fatigue. Because I think what people don't understand is what's actually being lost when they don't receive those pledges of either technology transfers or the funding that was promised. So tell us in the case of Gambia, because you haven't received what was promised, what exactly is happening to your environment, what is not changing because you haven't seen the promises from the international community delivered? There you go.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think in the case of the Gambia, as I said, at least we benefited from the Green Climate Fund. We received 25 million large-scale ecosystem-based ecosystem-based adaptation programs. And with that, we were able to restore over 7,000 hectares of degradable forest land and 3,000 hectares of graded agricultural land. And a focus is put on agroforestry. We constructed a food processing plant that focuses on forest economy, non-wood product, to enhance the livelihood support system of forest communities. Energy transition is important. It has to be just and fair with accompanying capacity, appropriate technology and financial support. The financial support to accompany this project, that is what is lacking. We need that. And one of the challenges that we are facing, which is also linked to the security around the region, is the trafficking of timber. And we know that will have direct impact on the society, on the climate. And now government has decided to launch a fight against the traffickers, because we know also the security implication, because the money they will receive from that, they will use it for other purposes. And we all know how climate change has affected all the countries. I just take the example of the Lake Chad. My big brother, Anadif, is sitting here. The shrinking of that lake has led to the rise of terrorism and other problems within the region. You know, in the past, when you give people some money, they will hand over their Kalashnikov to go and do other businesses. But today, with all the challenges, you use that Kalashnikov, it becomes a real business. You can engage in kidnapping and trafficking, in all kinds of things that will really affect the society. So this has a direct correlation with the effects of climate change. So it's important that our partners keep to their promise, and then we can deal with some of these fundamental issues.
Yeah.
And later on, I can give you example of how we are trying to have programs within the river basin of the Gambia within an organization called OMVG. Though right now we are having a lot of challenges also because of some of the dynamics in the region. It has not been very effective, and we are even unable to have meetings for some reasons specific to the region. But we'll come to that later on.
Okay. Yeah, people don't realize how interconnected everything is, and what they might think is a detail in one country or just a simple climate challenge they're facing in Gambia can have effects for the entire region, and even in criminal behavior that fuels trafficking around the world. And it actually affects all of us because it raises the level of criminality in developed countries as well. Let me move on to Madagascar then, because I imagine you've seen some similar challenges, because Madagascar also deals with a lot of environmental degradation, not a result of climate change, but actually part of even going back to the colonial past, when the environment was exploited. Even indigenous species and biodiversity was lost in Madagascar. So explain how that's now combining with climate change, and how Madagascar is trying to address dealing with degradation to the environment from historical pasts, as well as the criminal elements today. I know there's also illegal timber industry in Madagascar, massive deforestation, plus the added burden of the climate change.
Thank you. Alors, effectivement, pour nous, d'abord, parce que ça n'a pas été dit au début, c'est vraiment important pour Madagascar de participer à ce panel, de porter la voix de tout le peuple malagasy pour dire au reste du monde que nous sommes en danger, que nous sommes absolument menacés, et nous sommes tout simplement en train de subir le changement climatique plus que tout autre pays au monde. Madagascar, c'est un écrin de la biodiversité, c'est un trésor que le monde entier doit préserver. Nous avons 5% de la biodiversité mondiale, et nous avons aussi diverses espèces à protéger. Aujourd'hui, Madagascar se trouve dans une situation très difficile à cause des inondations, à cause de la sécheresse, à cause du phénomène d'El Niño qui touche tout le pays, mais particulièrement le sud de Madagascar. En 2021, pour limiter ces effets absolument horribles du changement climatique, nous avons mis en place ce qu'on appelle le plan national d'adaptation au changement climatique. C'est une avancée notable parce que nous avons finalement décidé de mettre en place un système avec différentes actions pour pouvoir justement offrir et donner des solutions à ce problème majeur. Nous savons que notre pays a aujourd'hui plus que jamais besoin de participer à ce type de plateforme pour pouvoir porter cette voix plus haut et plus fort encore. Madagascar souhaite vraiment qu'il y ait une accélération dans l'amélioration de cet accès au financement climatique, et nous recommandons vivement la la mise en place du Fonds vert pour le climat et avec une priorité qui doit être donnée aux nations insulaires. C'est absolument primordial. Et effectivement, comme l'a souligné mon collègue de Turquie, c'est vraiment important d'être lucide. Nous devons être lucides dans la manière de regarder ce problème commun qui est le changement climatique. Il y a des pays comme Madagascar qui n'auront pas la possibilité de s'aligner avec d'autres pays développés pour pouvoir porter une voix spécifique en disant certaines mesures peuvent être prises pour des États qui sont développés, mais des mesures qui ne seront pas adaptées à des pays comme Madagascar. D'abord parce que nous devons assurer d'abord les mesures en termes de changement et de progrès économique, mais nous devons aussi voir de l'autre côté comment s'adapter au changement climatique. Donc vous voyez bien qu'il y a deux choses qui sont érigées au rang de priorité, comment déjà sortir le pays de la pauvreté et comment en plus s'adapter au changement climatique. C'est un poids énorme. Nous devons déjà trouver une voie pour arriver au progrès et pour pouvoir lutter contre ce fléau. Donc vous voyez bien que les défis ne sont pas les mêmes pour tous les pays. Et donc, pour les pays en développement, il faut vraiment avoir cette vision de pouvoir apporter des solutions adaptées aux pays comme Madagascar. Vous avez bien souligné, Madame la modératrice, la question de la préservation de la biodiversité. Madagascar fait partie des 17 pays méga divers au monde. Ça veut dire que sur une superficie donnée, nous avons une concentration absolument phénoménale d'espèces endémiques, de faune et de flore endémiques. Ça veut dire que nous devons plus que jamais nous concentrer sur la manière de conserver ce que sera cet héritage pour toute l'humanité. Les générations futures, si on ne prend pas aujourd'hui les mesures adéquates, vont tout simplement se dire que nous leur avons laissé une terre qui ne produit plus assez. Nous leur aurons complètement retiré la possibilité de prospérer sur une terre qui doit être fertile. Nous laisserons aux générations futures un monde qui ne représente plus ce qu'il était il y a un siècle, 100 siècles et d'autres encore. Ce que je veux dire ici, c'est qu'il est urgent de prendre des mesures innovantes. Il faut absolument prendre des mesures audacieuses pour pouvoir lutter contre le changement climatique et surtout tendre la main aux pays qui en ont besoin. Il y a des pays comme les Maldives, par exemple, qui sont vraiment dans un état de péril. Il y a des pays comme Madagascar qui ne vont peut-être pas disparaître dans 50 ans, dans 100 ans, mais il y a d'autres pays insulaires qui sont vraiment en train d'être complètement submergés par les océans. Donc je crois que ce qu'il faut dire ici, dans ce forum, c'est qu'il est grand temps de se réveiller, parce que les générations futures ne nous pardonneront pas notre inaction. Merci.
The future generations will not forgive our inaction. Thank you.
And if you don't mind, I'd like to discuss something more specific with Turkey, because you very fortunately have a First Lady here who has really taken environmental protection to heart. She's launched a lot of initiatives to help first try to clean up the environment. One of them is Sıfır Atık, it's called, Zero Waste. On paper, it's an amazing initiative. But when it comes to witnessing consumer behavior, and this is not specific to Turkey, this is all around the world, if consumers are not involved, if they are not behaving in alliance with these initiatives, things don't improve. So talk to us about the case of Turkey and all the initiatives the government has launched to try and get consumers involved in helping the environment, helping to curb climate change. How difficult has that been? Because it is a global example, to get consumers to listen, to care about their behavior and how it affects the entire planet.
It's a very valid question, and with the initiative of our First Lady, we have this resolution, UN Zero Waste resolution, and we have also some meetings, some other things, but you are right, it's not that easy. Then we started to see what we can do, and then we realized we should start on the local administrations. We should go to the houses, not to have some generic policies trying to say something in big meetings, but in order to reach the houses, we need to cooperate with the local administrations, municipalities, and our main projects are concentrated on with the motto of, we are saying that this is valid on international level as well. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. This is why we try to create that spirit. And in our projects, we have this zero waste concept. We are working together with the EU. We are working together with some other organizations. We are also having some kind of projects in our, in other institutions that Turkey is part of it. But we see that in order to globalize this issue, we should go in a more local way. And we have some twin sister projects, and we are doing it with our neighborhood, with Bulgaria, with some other countries next to us. In the neighborhood, we try to emphasize the importance of these zero waste issues, because what we see that this is going step by step, and while you are going on a project, you should start with the vicinity, then to wider region, but in the meantime, with another gear to make it more institutionalized and more internationalized. And here we have the campaigns which we try to reach. Again, it is related with the title of our panel, to reach the young generation. And we would like to create some awareness and ownership in the minds of young generation. And in curriculum of primary schools, we put all these issues now. And we also encourage other countries to do so, because what we saw that the young generation is more careful about it. It's not easy to change the minds, but when we start that sensitivity, when you don't eat something, there is a price for that. And when you don't have the necessary care on these things, some others in the other part of the world will be suffering from this. And this is the strategy that we try to do, and to try to gain the minds and hearts of young generation, to have it as a tradition. Because, before all these issues, climate issues, were taken like that, green-oriented people, green parties were dealing with. But now it's not the case. From which, it doesn't matter from which wing of politics, everyone is very careful about the future and also very careful about their daily life. And here, the most important thing is we should not turn this climate issue financialization of the nature, but we should keep the concept of how we can live a better environment, better climate to the future generations. Thank you.
Thank you. It's really fascinating, because the question for this panel is not just about what future generations will think of our leadership, it's what future generations will think of us as consumers. We're the 8 billion people that are still insisting on consuming plastic, sometimes not using public transportation when we can, increasing traffic and the consumption of fossil fuels. I think it's another very important angle to mention, that we are as responsible as consumers as our leadership is to monitor our own behavior and in what we can contribute to bettering the climate. But I'll come back to Gambia now, because specific to developing countries, you talked about the illegal timber industry, for example. Also the fact that you're not getting the pledges needed to help better develop your agriculture, which in this day and age is more important than ever, because we've seen, especially after the war in Ukraine and during still, food security issues, massive food security issues. We've seen, in a way, developed countries throw developing countries under the bus when it comes to food security. If they think they're not getting their supplies, they are definitely not going to help poor nations in need. So tell us what Gambia is now looking at as far as developing, and this goes for Madagascar, of course, as well, developing an agricultural sector in tune with protecting the environment. Can it work? Can you get sustainable agriculture going that will allow your indigenous environment to thrive while also feeding a growing population in a country like Gambia?
Thank you very much. You know, the 21st century, especially the last 2 years, we've witnessed some terrible situation with the war in Ukraine, with the coronavirus pandemic. And without being cynical, I always say that it's the most democratic virus because it affects all of us, leaving no one behind. So we have to combine our efforts to fight it. When it comes to climate change also, and she talked about cette question de lucidité, that, yeah, it's very sad that we are thinking with coronavirus, we combine our efforts because we have to deal with it at noon, here and now. But with climate change, for us, it's a far distant thing, and we're not dealing with it. And that's a myopic vision that will be remembered for. In 1977, the first president of the Gambia, well before this issue was topical, issued what we call the Banjul Declaration, where he made a commitment to protect the flora and the fauna, because he was seeing what was coming. And in a country like Gambia, I remember just after the tsunami in Indonesia, I saw some reports. Then I was doing my PhD in France, saying that Gambia will disappear very soon because there were studies saying that, you know, we are below sea level, and every year the sea is rising for at least one meter. Well, thank God we are still here, nothing is happening. But I think it's important for the leadership not to think in terms of here and now, but to project themselves into the future. As I attended one seminar where they were talking about healing the future, because the measures have to be taken now, not for us to leave a legacy of a world that is completely destroyed. Coming to your question, agriculture, it's a paradox that you have a continent where we have more than 60% of arable lands, fertile lands. For us to be affected by a conflict far away from Africa, in a country that has how many, I don't know, the population of Africa is far bigger than that we are dependent on others to feed ourselves. That's a big contradiction. And that's also is a remnant of colonialism, because we put a lot of emphasis on cash crops, then crops that will help us deal with our food self-sufficiency. You go to countries like Bangladesh. I visited Bangladesh. Every piece of land will be cultivated to have something that will enable them to be self-sufficient in terms of food. And so it's important that we look at our own policies to devise ways and means that will be self-sufficient and less dependent on others. I think we have the capacity, we have the resources, we have a youthful population for us not to depend on anyone.
Okay, so how are you going to do that?
Well, it's a government decision to make agriculture a priority. Yeah. I know today Gambia, the government is trying to, well, we are trying to create the conducive environment to bring people back to the land. And we are working hard to make sure that in a few years we'll be self-sufficient in terms of food. And I must say that in that we have the support of countries like Korea, who is trying to implement a variety that will enable us to be self-sufficient and then use Gambia as a case study for others to replicate.
It is interesting because you manage diaspora affairs. Yes. And that's a problem throughout West Africa, that a lot of the brain drain and the talent has left the region. You need that back, especially when it comes to the security of your environmental affairs and your food security going forward. You need your diaspora to return. Do you think you're succeeding in re-attracting them?
It's not only Gambia. I always say that the much talked about African Renaissance cannot happen without the diaspora. If you look at the example of countries that were able to leapfrog, like China, not to mention them, like North Korea. They put a lot of, the diaspora occupy a pride of place in that development process. Because when you leave, you come back more knowledgeable. And for some reason, once you leave the source of your country, the source of Africa, and you become more patriotic about Africa and trying to make sure that you don't want to be lagging behind, because you realize that whenever you follow others' development models, you'll always be behind. Because in fact, when you follow, you are always behind. So you have to occupy the driver's seat. Others should come and complement your efforts, but not allow them to dictate to you your agenda for development. And there is the Spanish saying that even when you travel, you become more knowledgeable without even realizing it. So we need the diaspora back to come and help in the development process.
Right, in the development process. Minister from Madagascar, then twofold question for you. If you can also comment on how you're looking to food security in cooperation with managing the environment and not further damaging the environment, because we know countries are going to have to become more and more self-sustainable when it comes to feeding their populations. We've seen what happens, especially in the behavior during the pandemic. We couldn't even get vaccines. Developed countries would rather see them expire in their own refrigerators than send them off. And then the second part of the question, you talked about rising sea levels. I mean, that is a huge environmental disaster to have to manage. Can a country like Madagascar do it? If so, how? And if not, what happens to your population? Are you looking at massive displacement?
Sur la question de l'agriculture, effectivement, il y a beaucoup de choses à dire sur cette question. Madagascar a une vision, celle d'avoir sa souveraineté alimentaire déjà. Et inutile de vous dire qu'avec le contexte actuel, ça devient quand même un vrai défi. Déjà parce qu'il faut penser à une agriculture plus résiliente. Qu'est-ce que ça veut dire? Eh bien, tout simplement, il faut penser à des semences améliorées, il faut donner plus de nutriments à la terre pour que la terre produise davantage, mais vous savez, avec la déforestation. Je vais vous donner quelques chiffres. Madagascar, c'est un grand pays, un très grand pays. C'est pour ça qu'on l'appelle le 8e continent. C'est la 4e île la plus grande au monde. C'est 587 000 kilomètres carrés, c'est 5600 kilomètres de côte et 200 000 kilomètres de zone économique exclusive. Mais ce qui se passe à Madagascar est absolument alarmant. C'est 50 000 à 100 000 hectares de forêt qui disparaissent chaque année. Imaginez-vous que Madagascar est couvert à 10% de forêt, ce qui représente à peu près 8 millions d'hectares. Et avec cette déforestation massive, pouvez-vous imaginer à quel point est-ce que le pays peut être vulnérable aujourd'hui? L'agriculture doit être résiliente, mais il n'y a pas que ça. Nous avons besoin d'abord de technologies pour pouvoir améliorer cette agriculture. Nous avons besoin de plus de coopération avec des pays, avec des partenaires techniques et financiers, notamment dans la mise en œuvre de l'objectif de développement durable numéro 17. C'est aujourd'hui qu'il faut renforcer les partenariats mondiaux pour pouvoir trouver des solutions adaptées à chaque pays. À Madagascar, le sol est fertile à différents endroits. Nous avons des milliers d'hectares de surface cultivable, mais bien évidemment, il faut préparer ce sol. Et pourtant, ce sol est détruit de plus en plus et chaque année avec la déforestation. La déforestation, c'est l'érosion des sols. La déforestation, c'est la destruction de l'habitat naturel des espèces sauvages qui font la renommée de notre pays. La renommée de notre pays, et bien évidemment, va toucher des secteurs économiques comme le tourisme. Comment peut-on capitaliser sur nos ressources naturelles, nos magnifiques paysages connus à travers le monde, si cet habitat naturel, si cette biodiversité est détruite. Donc oui, la question de l'agriculture est très importante. Près de 80% de la population malagasy vit en milieu rural, ce qui signifie qu'il y a beaucoup de paysans producteurs. Aujourd'hui, le plus grand défi pour nous, c'est de transformer ces paysans producteurs en de véritables entrepreneurs et qui vont créer des emplois pour la population. Donc, il faut absolument opérer cette transformation agricole. Donc, déjà, il y a ça aussi sur deux plans. Transformer l'agriculture d'une agriculture de subsistance à une agriculture intensive, capable de nourrir la population et de créer des emplois, mais surtout faire en sorte à ce que cette agriculture soit résiliente et donc capable de s'adapter au changement climatique. Double défi, encore une fois. C'est pour ça que nous essayons à chaque fois. Moi, j'ai été nommée ministre des Affaires étrangères il y a seulement 6 semaines. C'est ma 6e mission à l'étranger. Mais à chaque fois, je porte le même message. Les nations insulaires ne font pas face aux mêmes défis que les nations qui partagent des frontières. Dans les programmes régionaux, il y a des constructions il y a des projets communs, comme construire des routes ensemble qui vont relier les différents pays. Il y a des projets communs, comme construire des pipelines qui vont d'un pays à un autre. Mais dans les pays qui sont des nations insulaires, ce ne sont pas les mêmes solutions. On ne peut pas apporter les mêmes solutions. Il faut assurer la sécurité maritime. Il faut assurer la sécurité alimentaire. Il faut assurer la sécurité sanitaire. Imaginez-vous s'il y a des pandémies et des épidémies. Si ça s'introduit à Madagascar, c'est toute la population, donc les 28 millions, les 29 millions de Madagascar qui seront touchés. C'est pour ça que nous avons des défis auxquels il faut apporter de vraies solutions. Et c'est pour ça que nous nous battons et que nous portons ce message. Sur la deuxième question que vous avez posée, notamment sur la montée des niveaux des océans, c'est vrai que Madagascar, aujourd'hui, dispose d'un certain nombre de programmes sectoriels des ministères qui vont permettre, en quelque sorte, de limiter cette montée des océans, d'abord en créant ce qu'on appelle des digues pour éviter que l'eau ne monte trop loin vers les terres intérieures et surtout pour pouvoir aussi limiter les effets de cette montée des eaux sur les communautés qui vivent au bord des mers. Alors, ce qui se passe aussi, c'est que nous avons mis en place des systèmes qui permettent aux populations locales de pouvoir vraiment avoir des activités génératrices de revenus qui vont pouvoir s'adapter déjà au changement climatique, mais aussi qui vont pouvoir leur permettre de tirer profit des ressources existantes sans toucher aux bénéfices que doivent avoir les générations futures. On encourage vraiment les pêcheurs, par exemple, à ne plus utiliser des filets qui vont tuer les petits poissons, les tout petits poissons, pour que les poissons puissent se reproduire pour les générations futures. Ce qui se passe, c'est qu'il y a encore des pratiques qui ne permettent pas de penser à plus loin qu'aujourd'hui. Et nous sommes aussi dans cette démarche de changer la mentalité, la manière dont les gens pêchent, la manière dont les gens cultivent sur leurs terres, la manière dont les gens font leurs activités pour qu'on puisse vraiment limiter les impacts à long terme, les effets néfastes à long terme. Et peut-être un dernier mot sur la question de l'innovation. C'est très, très important. On ne peut pas ouvrir de nouvelles portes avec des anciennes méthodes. Nous devons penser plus loin, avoir des objectifs à long terme. Comment est-ce qu'on peut avoir des impacts positifs si on applique toujours des vieilles méthodes, et surtout des vieilles méthodes qui ne sont pas toujours éprouvées? Il faut aller sur le terrain, trouver des solutions adaptées au terrain. C'est pour ça qu'à Madagascar, on incite vraiment nos partenaires à venir sur place, à aller dans ces communautés, à dialoguer avec ces communautés, pour savoir quels sont exactement leurs problèmes et quelles devraient être les solutions. Et quand on a des programmes comme les programmes de dons, on incite vraiment les partenaires à plutôt aller dans le transfert de technologie, dans le transfert de savoir-faire. Comment aider les gens à se passer de l'aide? C'est pour nous le plus important.
You know, it's so interesting because it's both good and bad that we've been able to engineer our way out of the worst damage. Because we save lives in the end, we innovate, but then we also set this example of complacency that we don't really need the prevention because we'll figure something out in the end game to stop the worst of the damage. And I think that's what we're seeing now when it comes to climate change. People not taking the goals seriously because science will find a way to build those sea walls to protect people. But that also has its environmental consequences, all the engineering we do. I'll tell you what, we're down to our last minutes, and I'd like the minister from Turkey, if you can, describe your ideal vision for the future. And I want you to think of yourself as kind of an elder statesman, a few decades, 3 decades perhaps into the future, and what you would want a young person to say to you about what you did for the climate that they're benefiting from.
I wish they would say that the projects and the ideas that we have were successful. What is the idea? I'll connect it with the food security. When there was war, the wheat price increased and the price of bread in Egypt increased 37%. It's such a, butterfly effect. It's more than that. And what I would expect, and I wish it would be successful, what we try to do to keep the young generation, I'll also combine, as you mentioned, about brain drain. Because you need to have production for food, for other things. And there is a triangle there. The triangle is public sector to have the right regulations, private sector should benefit, but this should be also with some academic contribution. For example, we are very good in drone technology, but now we are working how to make crop dusting with drones, agricultural benefit from these technologies. If we combine this technology with some new regulations and provide the young generation not to leave their regions, I witnessed it in Gaziantep. There's a tradition, for example, the young generation who studied abroad, instead of going to other countries, they come to Gaziantep back and they work in agricultural issues, agricultural plantation like pistachio and olive trees. And if we would keep this track in other regions, like in Madagascar or Gambia, not the young generation to leave their local areas, but to produce some food, some agricultural plantation in their own region, I believe this will have also a very interesting impact, because with geothermal technology, with some new ideas and satellites up there, they follow which area is fertile, which area is better to have the next crop. And I believe I'll use the formula of energy. Energy equals to MC square. We should use energy for the young generation, and we should create a tradition. It equals to technology, innovation, and to have food and energy security together with the water management. If we leave a good world to the young generation to be aware of importance of water management, agriculture, and using the renewable energy or the new energy sources, because every day we have new ideas. For example, now we are working on which plants can absorb more carbon. And there are serious works on that. And I believe that we should leave a word to the young generations, the future generations, to a word that advanced in these areas. Thank you.
And the foundation of everything you just described is protecting, sustaining a healthy environment. Minister from Gambia, how confident are you that future generations of Gambians will look back and say thank you to your leadership now for your country of the future?
Well, I will go even beyond Gambia. I want to say that if we want to be remembered for the future, we have to take actions today that will have positive impact on the future. But if you continue to live like happy-go-luckies, we'll jeopardize the future of our children and our grandchildren. And I think each of us sitting here, we want a better future for our generations, our future generation. We talk here about mentioned somehow, we've been very diplomatic about the stupidity of vaccine nationalism. We'll commit the same mistake if we think that climate change is, we have to deal with it within our own context, looking from the perspective of our own interests as a country. This is a global challenge that we have to face together, not only Gambia towards Gambians, Gambian leadership towards Gambians, but the whole world should come together. The leadership should come together to find a solution, not to jeopardize the future.
As you say that, though, you've admitted that you don't believe climate conferences are the answer. You're avoiding them now.
Well,
so what do we do?
For the simple reason that we go there, we make big talks, big pledges, but we are not implementing anything. And the big players are the ones even who are dragging us behind for their own selfish interests.
So how do you want to see that changed? Is it even possible?
It's possible with commitment, with a new generation of leadership, putting pressure on the big powers. And I think the Global South should stand as one against the big players.
Okay. Do you think that can happen?
It can happen because it's our own future that is at stake. So we will not allow others to come and destroy our future.
Okay. Minister from Madagascar, you as well. I mean, do you think your future generations will look at you 30, 40 years in the future and say thank you for your leadership on the environment, because we live in a better country today because of it?
C'est important, effectivement, que l'on puisse permettre aux générations futures d'être reconnaissants. C'est pour ça que chaque jour, il faut faire quelque chose en plus. Ne pas se contenter d'aller dans nos bureaux pour signer des dossiers, mais faire quelque chose pour
Rather than signing some documents in our offices, we need to go beyond that. We need to do more every day. Partnership is key.
Pourquoi est-ce que du temps du Covid, nous avons réussi à coopérer ensemble? Parce qu'il y a eu péril en la demeure. Il s'agit d'une question de vie ou de mort. Mais là, c'est exactement la même chose. Sauf qu'à différents, sauf peut-être en termes de temps et d'impact. Mais c'est exactement la même chose. Donc, si nous arrivons à mettre en place un partenariat durable pour vraiment sauver notre planète et les générations futures, nous devons être visionnaires. Et les générations futures doivent se souvenir de nous comme des leaders responsables, des leaders qui ont pris des mesures pour pouvoir limiter les effets du changement climatique, certes, mais qui ont pris les mesures pour pouvoir planter davantage d'arbres, des millions d'arbres, pour pouvoir reverdir nos pays respectifs. Mon collègue de Turquie a dit tout à l'heure qu'il était aussi possible d'utiliser les technologies. Et effectivement, j'aimerais juste soulever deux petits points pour finir. Nous avons besoin d'utiliser les technologies qui vont nous permettre d'avoir des modes de vie durables. Et nous devons avoir des projets multi-acteurs. Ce n'est pas que l'affaire du gouvernement. Ce n'est pas que l'affaire de ceux qui font les lois. C'est surtout l'affaire de tout le monde. C'est l'affaire de tout le monde. Des jeunes, des vieux, des personnes qui sont dans des situations de handicap. C'est vraiment notre avenir commun. Donc il faut des projets qui sont absolument inclusifs. C'est très important. Voilà. So if I may say some words in English, I would just like to say that it's very, very crucial for us.
I would like to say a few words in English as well.
Partner up together and build a new generation of thinkers, of leaders, to take the necessary measures so that our future generations will remember us as responsible leaders. Thank you.
Thank you. Minister from Turkey, quick final words.
What distinguished minister mentioned, to know how, to share the know-how is very important. Because then I will not be very harsh, but it will be a new kind of colonialism. If the solar panel or windmills are produced in the hands of some others, and not the technology is not shared with the ones that really need it, then we will have a different system which will also have its own flaws, and the future generations will have more problems with that. Thank you.
Indeed. Mehmet, go ahead. Yeah.
I just want to end by saying that no country is an island. dealing with the issue of climate change. This is a global challenge that we have to face together.
Minister Mamadou Tangara, that will be the final word. I'd like to thank all three of these panelists really so much for joining us. It's a fascinating discussion, and there's still so much more to talk about. I'm sure we'll be rejoining it in many conferences to come. So really, thank you. Greatly appreciate it.